My research topic is on the achievement gap between white and colored students. I chose to complete my research on this topic because of my interest and curiosity about this huge issue within the education system in the United States. I figured if I learn more about the topic, then I can be more proactive in helping to prevent and reduce this gap in my future career as an educator. Before completing my research, I had little knowledge on the topic. I was aware of the issue, but not aware of the several factors that must be considered contributing to the gap. My research has helped me to identify many strategies and approaches to adapt in order to avoid this achievement gap and help reduce the gap in my future classroom and school. These are the books, graphics, and articles that I use to complete and support my research. So what is the achievement gap? The achievement gap in the United States refers to the observed, persistent disparity in measures of educational performance among subgroups of U.S. students, especially groups defined by socioeconomic status, race or ethnicity, and gender. The questions I was searching for answers to in my research were: what factors contribute to the achievement gap, and in what ways can educators go about preventing and closing said gap? In order to find answers to these questions, I read several scholarly articles on the topic written by professionals and educators. I also completed multiple interviews to gain perspective from individuals who have had first-hand experience with and knowledge on the achievement gap. To gain a deeper understanding on the achievement gap, I conducted interviews with teachers and principals to learn about their experiences and knowledge on the topic. Through the interviews, I feel as if I have gained much insight and perspective on the topic. It was interesting to learn from educators who have first-hand experience with the issue. Those I interviewed included one elementary school principal and one middle school principal who were both former elementary teachers, as well as a current elementary school teacher. They are all from small towns in southern Minnesota. As defined, the achievement gap generally affects groups based on socioeconomic status, race, or ethnicity, and gender. As I learned throughout my research and completion of my interviews, the groups affected often depend on the area of the school district. For example, the educators that provided me with information all came from small school districts in rural settings without much diversity. However, they all had knowledge about the issue that is often found to be more apparent in diverse urban settings. According to an education professional, the environment of the community and area in the nation in which that school is located plays a role in the education of students and the outcomes that are tied to that learning. The achievement gap between white students and minority is a big concern in our country. There are many factors that contribute to the achievement gap. However, none of them seem to be the sole cause. The problem is that schools do not follow a culturally responsive approach, and not all students feel safe, supported, and welcome. Many educators have cultural biases, some without even knowing it. Unfortunately, these biases can have a negative impact on some students' education. Therefore, a shift in the attitudes and priorities of teachers, administrators, and policymakers is necessary. It is important to put our cultural biases aside and truly create a culturally responsive classroom that follows best practice techniques and support all students no matter their race, gender, or socioeconomic status. When looking at the different factors that contribute to the achievement gap, one must consider both in-school factors and out-of-school factors. Some of the in-school factors include curriculum, instruction, discipline, language barriers, and homework. It is necessary for educators to make sure that our curriculum is meeting the needs of our students and that we are using best practice instructional strategies in order to support every student. There is also a belief that homework is an indicator of success, and it is important to remember that not all students get the necessary support at home in order to succeed in this area, and therefore we should not be basing their successes on homework alone. There is also the entire population of English language learners who often fall behind other students because of the language barrier they face and other difficulties. Finally, discipline. It's a huge problem that affects the achievement gap. Some of the biggest predictors of students' achievement is their attendance and behavior. One of the biggest points made in my research was that discipline is of course crucial in any school setting. However, sometimes it is taken too far, and this is one of the biggest reasons for the achievement gap, especially when differences in race are considered. Research shows that in-school and out-of-school suspensions account for approximately 1/5 of racial differences in school performance. Therefore, it is important to keep this in mind when deciding upon a student's punishment for misbehavior. On the other hand, there are also out-of-school factors that must be considered when thinking about what contributes to this achievement gap. One of the biggest factors is parent involvement and support in their child's education. But then, of course, that turns into an issue of whether or not parents have the time and resources available to do so. The amount of support received at home heavily relies on a family's socioeconomic status, as that alone can affect so many aspects of a child's life, such as healthcare, food insecurity, abusive households, and so much more. Another factor that plays a role is the language barrier. If there is a non-English speaking family and their child brings home homework in English, then they will obviously not be able to help their child. Overall, there are so many things that can affect whether or not a child is getting the appropriate resources in order to support him or her, as well as what may be going on in the child's home life that is in turn affecting their learning in school. So what can we do to close this achievement gap? In order to make strides towards closing and preventing this gap, there are many strategies and approaches that can be implemented to do so. As educators, it is important to have enhanced cultural competence. For example, considering students' diversity to be an asset, being sensitive to their home cultures, and understanding and capitalizing on their cultural abilities, resilience, and effort. Additionally, it is important that educators provide comprehensive support for all students, put in extra effort to outreach to students' families, provide extended learning opportunities, use effective school-wide and classroom strategies that support learning in all forms, gain access to qualified staff, and finally provide students with adequate resources that are necessary to support them in any and every way possible. Overall, as educators, there are so many steps that we can take in order to support all of our students, and it is vital that we do so. So what can I, as a future educator, do with this information? What does it mean to me now? Why does it matter? Now that I have much more information and knowledge on the topic of the achievement gap, I feel as if I am better prepared and aware of this issue as I go into the teaching profession. I now have background information on the many factors that contribute to the achievement gap, which will make me more conscious of indicators to look for from the students while I am teaching. I'm also more knowledgeable as to what strategies and approaches I can implement in my future classroom in order to stop this gap.